Welcome back, Tom. So good to have you. It has been a while, and we are excited to discuss some of the clues that have led to the worldview of atheism, and in particular, some of the principles or touch points upon which the atheistic worldview is built. We want to just follow the argument where it leads and discuss different talking points that Tom is going to present, and then we'll have a back and forth and go from there. So I don't know if we can maybe we'll do like 5 minutes each, and then
Sure.
from there.
Just have
Great.
like an open conversation. That's fine too.
Yeah, and then we'll go into that more of a conversational style. That'll be perfect. So,
Sure.
Tom, take it away.
Well, thanks for having me back. I'm glad we got our technical issues settled.
Yeah,
Um,
will join us soon, but we'll see.
no problem. No problem. At least we got one thing taken care of for today. But
Exactly.
so, I mean, what leads someone to a quote atheistic worldview? Um, I guess quite a few things. Tell you the truth, whether someone was in the faith and lost it, whether someone never had it and looks at others as, with curiosity as how could somebody believe these things. I'm more of the latter of the two. Again, I think I told you that I didn't grow up in a religious household at all. We went to church, more socially for Christmas and Easter, and that's about it. It was for myself to play with the other kids, and but I never again saw or had any connection to anything that the church had ever really said or done. It just didn't make any sense to me personally. But what led me personally to it? I guess just the reading and understanding, questioning things. Okay, well, if I'm going to believe this God, well, I have to believe this God, and I have to believe this God, and I have to believe all of them until they're all disproven. I think that notion is rather silly, and it will just it's kind of futile, to tell you the truth, because it's mentally impossible to believe in every God, first off, and no one can disprove any of them to 100% degree. So for just a straight rational perspective, either they're all wrong, one of them is right, which again, the chances of that one being right, when taken of the numbers of gods that man has created and then dismissed, is extremely slim. So the idea that they're all wrong is a lot more plausible to me than not. There's also the infinite regress of gods that any creationist doesn't have an answer to. Basically, my question to that is, if every watch requires a watchmaker, how far back does that infinite regress of gods go? It truly would be infinite, because if something more intelligent requires something that much more intelligent to make it, where's the end to this? So are you essentially worshiping the wrong God because your God has a God? Should you be worshiping that God's God? You know what I mean? Like how far, and it starts getting to the point of sounding rather silly. When you take it to the ridiculous level, like something like that, how far back do you take the creationist theory? Okay, well, why just one God? Let's go 100 gods deep. Which God do I need to worship? I don't know. I don't even know which God we're talking about anymore. Uh, so again, it's from a personal senses perspective, I look up, I see stars, I fly, I don't see anything that shouldn't be there. I've never witnessed anything supernatural. I don't know anybody that's witnessed anything supernatural. Have I had some strange occurrences? Sure. That I can't explain? Yeah. That freaked me out? Yeah. But again, do I attribute that to something that is supernatural? No. Could there be a natural explanation? Yes. I just don't know it. Simple as that. So, but to automatically jump to something that has never been proven to ever exist, and again, I always fall back to James Randi offering $1 million for how many decades to anybody that can display anything supernatural, and no one ever collecting. Again, just leads you to believe, or leads me to believe, that it just isn't there. So, I mean, that's kind of where where my path took me.
Mhm.
So you can take it from there.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Just kind of starting off from the top. I too grew up well in the other side of the household, being more going to church every Sunday, um, having Sunday school classes and Bible stories and so on and so forth. So I very much grew up in a Christian church, and I would say though that as I grew older, I did get more skeptical of it as I was exposed to more, I don't know, public high school or at a college, or um, just seeing some of the things that I did. It made me wonder, okay, well, why is it that I believe that there could be a God, and that God would be one? There'd be one God over this whole creation, who started this whole universe. So, how could I believe those things? I think that there are clues, and clues aren't proof in and of themselves. I think they just lead more towards a probable explanation for um, the possibility of the existence of God. And I think, that part of what you were saying is like, yeah, we read and we question, we look at all these different fields of knowledge and study, and we observe, what it is that is around us, this conversation that we're having about the topic of whether or not God exists. We observe, and we make a distinction between what we perceive and like you said it before, like some of the stuff you've seen is like, am I hallucinating, or what is it exactly that's going on that I'm perceiving? And I think that kind of gets at, okay, well, is there a bigger transcendent reality outside of us? um, I don't think that means that I have to disprove every single God, because uh, I think, just to kind of get down to the brass tactics of it, I think this conversation over the existence of there being just one God, an all creator, it has been going on for so long that it kind of has so much work that's been done within this conversation, that it, for me, it's like, well, to say that there's just thousands of gods out there, and that you have to disprove each one. Well, if you finally land on the one that says, well, there's none of them, there's no thousands of God, then that's the same mathematical probability as saying that one of them is right, or everything's all wrong, and we just kind of go in towards nothingness when it comes, and the meaninglessness. So, me and you, we obviously agree that 2 + 2 = 4, but that doesn't exactly get our hearts racing or make us think about what makes life worth living, or that question that death poses to each person. Um, and I think that this conversation around whether or not God exists is so crucial, because it frames the way in which you perceive reality versus, okay, is this person just totally fanatical? Are they hallucinating? What kind of God is this that I'm actually believing in? Um, to say, though, that it's just an infinite regress, um, I just I think that that's kind of a categorical error. And what I mean by that is, we're talking about there being the ultimate being, the lack of a better term, the unmoved cause, the first cause of this universe. And we're saying that it is immaterial, infinite, eternal, all these huge words that we only can barely kind of wrap our minds around. Eventually, though, it kind of says, okay, well, who created God? If God is the creator, then who created God? Well, I think that's a categorical error, kind of alike to saying that the color blue doesn't exist because I can't smell it. Um, God, this idea that there's one God, a creator above all of this, then yeah, that eventually it does have to stop. The infinite regress argument doesn't really um, do it for me in some ways, but I just kind of think about this topic too, of there being a God as one in which, or there being no God, um, one in which we have this conversation and we talk about ways in which, okay, what's the evidence for it or what's the evidence against it? And evidence is something that is not proof, but a word that I could use more is it is they're clues. You follow the clues, you follow the argument where it leads, and then you make more of a conclusion. And yeah, is that faith? I would say, yeah, I would say that the atheist and the theist both have a faith position. Um, just kind of to close, I think that C.S. Lewis was working something out when he said this idea of, I can't see the sun directly, in response to a question about how could you believe in a God you can't see. He said, I can't see the sun directly, very directly, but by the sun I can see everything, and I have a framework of, for lack of a better word, a metaphysical framework, which I can put everything in. And that quote is just something I found interesting. But that's kind of my response to yours. So if you want to take it away, go for it.
Sure. I know I've heard your dad's argument where he says, that you weren't an accident, that your creation was an accident and your death is an accident and everything in between is an accident.
Right.
I totally disagree with that, based on the fact that you are mathematically an accident. Given the amount of sperm that one made it through to fertilize the egg that made you, all the others died.
Right.
That in itself is a mathematical miracle, shall I say, accident. The so everything in between, and your death. Why can't your death be an accident? How many people die of accidents randomly daily? Right? So everything in between can easily be an accident. What if your mom never planned to get pregnant? I'm not saying you personally, but I'm saying in general. What if your mom never planned to get pregnant and she did? Now that child is quote unquote an accident, right? She never planned to get pregnant. It happened, but now that child is an accident.
Well, say that it's mathematically improbable. It's not totally impossible. It's just more a matter of saying, okay, this is a high degree of complexity to this mathematical equation. I think that's something that, as we look at the universe, the universe has a deep mathematical framework to it.
Yeah, but I really don't think the universe cares at all about you, not in the slightest.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, our lifetime in the realm of universal time is like a blink of an eye, really. So we can't really observe much of anything. We can observe a sliver of time. Literally, it's a hair sliver of time for our lifetime. Science allowed us to go, quote unquote, back in time with, looking at stars that have, long died. And, now we're seeing the light from millions and billions of years ago. But again, that's as close as we have come to actually going, quote, back in time. Right. So, again, I personally don't think that science requires faith. I disagree with you there. I don't have faith. I go where the evidence shows, where good arguments lead. If I see an argument as faulty or fallacious or circular, I'm going to call it out for what it is. Again, I don't see science as having an agenda. I don't see science as having any kind of a hierarchy, so to speak. Everything is peer reviewed that goes on to, be held as a theory or a law of some kind. Again, it's not meant, just here's a book from 2,000 years ago, and this is the way that we've, translated and transcribed it today, and this is the way it is. And it's not up for debate. It's not up for amendment. It's not up for anything. Big difference. I don't require any faith in my position at all. I really don't see it. Again, I follow where physics leads. I've been, listening to guys like Bart Ehrman, listening to Robert Robert Price, I think his name is, Richard Carrier, a few of these guys that,
You mentioned Stephen
uh,
Hawking too,
still, yeah. I mean, I've read a lot of his books,
right?
but Neil deGrasse Tyson as well, and there just is no need for a god,
Mhm.
any god. There's no need for one. We've already gotten past this.
Well, what is there a need for then?
To make life better for the next generation.
Right, so that
Uh,
you're getting at meaning, right? That you can't make life better for the next generation by just teaching them 2 + 2 = 4. Like
no,
there's
but I can teach them to essentially pay it forward to do nice things for people and have that as a propagative factor to do something good for someone else that's going to in turn do keep that chain running. Why
right.
would I not do something like that? It's as if I look at it on a completely selfish level, it's good for me too. It eventually it'll come back around to benefit me.
But you don't want the next generation to be naive either, as far as when you teach them about the paying it forward or the golden rule. You're also gonna have to tell them like, hey, there's a lot of people out there who are fairly malevolent or who you know can rip people off. There's other people out there who are psychopaths and so on and so forth. And so to teach them shrewdness and to teach them a kind of a working theory of good and evil, I think is something that they need in life if they're going to survive not just tragedy, but also malevolence, a real evil that seems to be something that this human population can't ever rid itself of. Does that make sense?
I don't think it ever will. It's part of who we are. People will do good things. People will do bad things. Given the right situation, it will happen. That's just the bottom line. Do people get taken advantage of? Yes, happens every day. Look at Wall Street. You think any of those Wall Street tycoons made it to where they are by being nice?
Mhm.
No, not a chance. Right? Do you think they care? No, I really don't. They're content in their 10,000 square foot mansions and whatever, and that's that. Again, you're not going to teach a person like that stealing from the teacher's pension fund is wrong, or stock manipulation and screwing a whole bunch of people over is wrong. It's not going to get into their heads. So
Is that
again,
their
the
perspective, or is that actually objectively wrong?
it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Because I think like what Charles Darwin was getting at when he got to some of his evolutionary ideas was like, how do you trust your own mind to perceive, good and bad, or truth and falsity when it comes to some of those issues above survival? Like, sure, there's survival mechanisms that we have, but like these ideas of truth that what truthfully a Wall Street executive stealing from a teacher's pension fund isn't just a matter of might makes right, or he's just clever and the teacher's just naive and nice. It's like, no, there's an objective wrongness to that you can trust your mind to perceive. Um, I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
For you and I talking right now, would we say someone like Bernie Madoff is an evil bastard? Yeah. I mean, look at all the people he screwed over. Um, on the flip side, how many people did he make a lot of money that couldn't care less about giving it back to the people he screwed over? You know what? So on one side, he's the devil, and on the other side, he was a hero. And
If
because
the
those people,
yardstick is money, if the yardstick is just money, then yeah, he made some people a lot of money and good for them, and he stole from a lot of other people and boo hoo for them. But I really don't think in our conversation, and Tom, I think you would agree with me that the yardstick isn't money. It's a matter of something called universal morality of an absolute, a moral absolute that Bernie Madoff violated and burned a lot of people and messed up a lot of people's lives. and we can both say that that is wrong, and maybe even
But
evil.
money can corrupt anything, anyone. Look at
Right.
the Vatican.
Right.
Do you honestly think if Jesus came back today and saw the gold-laden Vatican as it is today, that he would think that's a good thing?
Yeah. I mean,
Really? You
yeah.
know, a man of simple cloth is going to come back and be like, "Oh, they made all this palatial, gold everywhere in my name."
Right. I would agree with you. They would be. It's uncomfortable
Really?
to think about how when Jesus returns a second time, what he's going to find.
No,
Uh,
but you know what I'm saying. So even the head of the Catholic Church has rotated itself completely to money.
okay,
So why wouldn't you?
that's a great question. I mean, money brings an incredible amount of security and comfort and feelings of well-being. But
What moral stance would you go against if I offered you $100 million?
right, so you're kind of making the argument everybody has their price. I mean,
It's true.
yeah,
It is true. Everyone sells themselves for a price.
right.
Whether you work for $15 an hour or you're a Wall Street exec, everyone sells themselves for a price.
Hmm.
So
Well,
again, for ultimate financial security. Hey, Cliff, how are you?
Good. How you be, Tom?
Good. Thank you. So for the ultimate financial security of you, your kids, how far are you willing to bend your morals?
hmm
I don't know. Yeah, it's tough to give an answer unless you're in that situation, isn't it?
well, it is tough, but I think it's only tough because there is such a thing as moral absolutes. There is such a thing as looking after the people who are really getting ripped off and are at
And
extreme.
and I'll go one step above. How about no one could ever find out? You knew no one could ever find out that
Mhm.
you bent your morals. Would you do it for the complete financial security of you and multiple of your family's generations?
Well, I think you're unsettling my conscience a little bit more by saying that it could be something that's a total secret.
Well, that's what
Uh,
I'm saying. Only you know. So it's only between you and your own morals.
right,
No one else is going to come down on you and judge you for this, for whatever it may be. But
right. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, we're just discussing. We went back and forth for 5 minutes each on some of the reasons why he came to atheism, but now we're talking about the Vatican, how the church handles money, or not how the church handles money, but more how the
uh,
individual
how money can
corrupt people.
essentially corrupt your morality, and has obviously.
Well, first of all, Scripture is very full of stories regarding how to handle money and the trappings of it. How wealth is a snare in a real way, and can put you in situations that are very tricky, but also you give up some of your morals, like you're saying, Tom. Um, but there's tons of warnings of Jesus to.
Do you think that OJ would have got off if he didn't have that money to have the Kardashians and all the other lawyers that he had to have the money to pay for?
Well,
No,
right, yeah,
he
justice
would
isn't
be he'd be
blind.
another black man in jail. Let's be real.
Right. What are some of your reactions to it, Cliff, or what are some of your thoughts on it?
Well, I think, Tom, you and I have a deep desire to live moral lives, to be men of integrity. But I think that your worldview of atheism wipes out the foundation for morality, for integrity, by essentially saying it's relative and by essentially saying that when we all die, we all go back in the same box, the fertilizer pit.
Yes.
And like it or not, that wipes out any basis for moral absolutes. So all I'm appealing to is saying, come on, Tom, you know that moral absolutes are real. You have a respect for integrity. You seek to live a life of integrity. So
See, I disagree with any moral absolutes. Let's
don't
stop there.
the basis for moral absolutes by embracing atheism.
But there's no such thing as moral absolutes, given the situation.
Your whole argument of the importance of integrity is based on the idea that integrity is real and that it really does matter what you do in the dark as well as what you do in the light.
No, but my question was, how far are you willing to bend your morals if no one else knew for the financial security of you and your entire family for generations to come?
As a
That was
follower
that was
of
the
Christ,
question.
as a follower of Christ, the answer is very simple. We do not violate moral absolutes for the sake of financial prosperity for ourselves or for our descendants.
Tom, I think you're hitting a truth though in saying that when you're in the dark or when you can keep it a secret, you are much more tempted to want to steal like you set up the question by saying, if
Well,
nobody
it's not a matter of somebody coming and saying, "Oh, you did this," and I know about it. It's a matter of you living with it in your own head. Could you make it cool with your own self for a price? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think the novel Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, I don't know if you've read it or not, but it's a fascinating portrayal of human psychology, of living with what you did, and is there such a thing as getting away with murder? And how it erodes a person's.
But I mean, again, just because I might have done something in my past doesn't mean I'm that person today. I can learn from a mistake, say it was a nasty thing I did, it was an immoral thing I did, move on with my life, and no one's the wiser. Right?
Well, anybody could do that.
So, where's your moral absolute fall into that system?
It's very simple.
When I've learned from a mistake nobody knows about.
We have free will, Tom. We don't have to do anything.
Of course.
Well, but I think you're getting at, well, where's the punishment there, or where's the justice there? If, say, O.J. Simpson could get the best lawyer, or whoever could get the best lawyer and get away with a crime, I think part of it is followers of Christ. The cross is a very public spectacle of punishment being meted out. Of there being really judgment of what's done.
What I'm saying is, okay, here I'll even put it on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Say I'm on a business trip and I had a situation that I could cheat on my wife, and I knew 100% there's not a prayer in hell that she's going to ever find out.
Okay.
I go ahead with it.
Mm-hmm.
I realize I made a terrible mistake after the fact, and I swear to myself I'm never going to do that again. So I've made a positive out of a negative. I've learned from a mistake, but I'm not going to face any repercussions from it because my wife's never going to find out.
So if it's just once, then, I mean, you have to live with that, and it's something that will
if I've already, okayed it with me in my own head going, you know what, I've made a terrible mistake. I'm never going to do that again. Live and learn. And that's that. That's the end of that story.
Right. But is there something called like integrity, where like the root word of integrity is integer? It's a oneness to it. And there's a lack of oneness when you say, oh, I'm going to bifurcate this section of my life, move it over here and keep it a secret. And the rest is my life that I have in relation to everybody else. Because that's what Raskolnikov happens to him in Crime and Punishment. He can't live, or he eventually breaks down under the crushing secret of a murder that he committed, and he can't get away from his conscience, or just of that idea of oneness, that if we're thriving as human beings, what we say and the truth claims that we make are aligning with how we're living and how we're acting. There's a oneness to it, an integrity. Does that make sense?
Sure. But again, if you have a moral absolute system, how am I being punished for that moral wrong? I'm
How
not.
would you answer that?
Well, if there is no God, you'll never ultimately be punished for your wrong. But if there is a God and there is a day of judgment, then he will hold you responsible for the wrong that you've done, and you'll be punished for it. But if you accept Christ, you're accepting God taking the punishment for our wrongdoing in himself, which is the basic.
So you're cool with scapegoating. That's exactly what you're talking about right now.
Every time you forgive, you are absorbing the cost of the person's wrongdoing.
No, but I'm not talking about forgiveness. You're now putting something that I did on something else. That's called scapegoating.
No, what I'm saying is when you look at forgiveness, you begin to understand that forgiveness is costly. It always costs somebody. Somebody has to.
But you're saying that if I give my life to Jesus, then he will absolve me of that sin.
He has paid the penalty for your sin. He will forgive you, and that's what
That
forgiveness
is scapegoating.
Well, it'll also lead you to apologize to the other parties. I think you're highlighting our interconnectedness of saying, okay, my wife's involved here. This person that I also cheated on my wife is here as well. So this is a party of three here. I got to, as Cliff said, ask for forgiveness. They're going to be absorbing the costs, and he's also saying Jesus absorbed the costs at the cross.
For what? When he didn't even know I was alive, when I wasn't alive then.
Well, for lying, like Judas Iscariot, Judas lied a bunch and then sold him for 30 pieces of silver and like made all these lies up. Like Jesus went to the cross to forgive him, to absorb.
What does that have to do with us today? I still don't see the relationship with what that has to do with us today in the slightest.
You said you made a terrible mistake in going to Las Vegas. Your wife never finds out about it. Your simple admission that you made a
First off,
terrible
let's just clear this up. This is a hypothetical situation. It never happened.
Hypothetical.
Your hypothetical situation highlights the fact, Tom, that you live as if there are moral absolutes when you say, I made a terrible mistake.
But that's just for myself. But, I mean, but you can just say that's, you know, I don't want to ever do that again because I have fear of getting caught and then losing my marriage.
Well, why not? If you're smart enough to go do it one time and not get caught, I'm sure you're smart enough to do it 5 and 10 times and not get caught. So why is it that you can't justify it really? If you're being perfectly honest with yourself,
say you don't want to lose half of everything you own.
You into a real moral absolute.
Say you just don't want to lose half everything you own.
Then I would argue, I think you are not that superficial a person, and you know how superficial that is to live your life that way.
But many do, Cliff.
Yes, because we have free will. Because we're not automatons, we're not robots, and we can do some pretty twisted things.
Okay, so that leads me into a very simple question, into how does your God ever interact with the natural world now? Why doesn't he ever step in to stop something truly bad from happening? I'm not saying be a cosmic bellboy, but could you not stop a catastrophe? A tsunami?
He has limited his power by giving us free will.
Okay, so what you're telling me, a tsunami has free will to kill 250,000 people in Asia?
Well, I think, Tom, you yourself said that the universe, it seems, doesn't care about us sometimes. Well,
for sure it doesn't.
The tsunami in Southeast Asia was caused by some tectonic plates shifting on the ocean floor, you know, pushing water up and then the water getting displaced out of the ocean and drowning people. I think those are natural laws.
But could you not think of like a terrible way to die than have this wall of water come at you and you're drowning amongst other water and debris and crap?
It's horrible. It's horrible. I totally agree. There's a horrific nature to any death, and I think that's.
But this is a naturally caused situation.
Right. So I would agree with you. It is somewhat unnatural, but let's not, you know, let's stay with, okay, there's some natural laws and then there's some laws of thought, and we don't want to confuse the two or say that they disagree with each other because the evidence doesn't show that. Okay. This tsunami is a horrific, natural or not natural. We can even call it evil, and it shouldn't be that way. But, and this is a big but, if there is a supernatural God, why didn't he intervene? Why didn't he stop the tsunami from happening? Ultimately, I don't know exactly why, but
I do.
Why?
There's only a couple of options.
Okay. What are the options?
Either he started it and wanted it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
B, he is not all that powerful and couldn't stop it from happening. Or C, doesn't exist. There's no other options.
Which one do you think is most probable?
I think the answer to that is quite obvious. I'm with C.
You're with C. Well, then like you said before, though, you were getting at that life is ultimately meaningless. Then it doesn't matter if there, you know, a tsunami happened or if it was a terrorist attack instead that killed those people. It's either humanity that messed up humanity or the natural disaster.
But it's not. It's not.
humanity.
And I can clearly explain why. Because you know why? Because what if one in that 250,000 people would have found the cure for MS? What if one in that 250,000 people would have found the cure for AIDS? And now that person's dead
Mhm.
because of a natural disaster. Do you not think that that one discovery that could have potentially been there would justify that person living?
So aren't you saying that we should aim for an ideal, right? An ideal of heaven, that heaven will be a place where there is no more MS or tsunamis?
No.
Or,
What I'm saying is, if there was a God, could he not know, or should, I mean, obviously he should know that there is that person that is going to create the cure for MS or cure for AIDS or whatever in that 250. You know what? Maybe I shouldn't kill that person because he's going to do a shitload of good, excuse my language, for humanity.
Mhm.
I don't know. I, as a God, would stop that person from dying if I knew, and obviously I would know as a God that that should happen. No?
Well, are you highlighting then that death is the end of the story for that person who could have?
No, because what I'm saying is, again, we're all trying to make our lives and the lives of our children and next generation better. That's the whole point of all this. The point is not to go backwards, to go forwards. You
Who
know
says?
what? Who says?
Mm-hmm.
Common sense.
Mm-hmm. Who's common sense?
Mine. I can only
Good.
speak for myself.
Now, so you're dictating that your common sense defines truth with a capital T and reality. And if God doesn't, and people don't square with your definition of common sense and truth, then they're either don't exist or they're wrong. It's quite a position you're holding to, Tom.
Yeah, and I'll stand behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't prove, as I can't prove there no God exists, you can't prove me wrong. Same by the same token. So unless you have some magical bullet in your gun that's gonna, send me running, you're gonna have a hard time with this one too, Cliff. Because I can't prove no God exists or doesn't exist. Sorry, it's impossible.
Human arrogance is amazing, Tom. It has nothing to do with
I
proof.
agree, and to think
You
that
made
you
yourself
have,
the universe.
to think that you,
made yourself the one who defines what is common sense and what is right and what is wrong.
I
And
know, but Cliff, you don't see your own arrogance in this
incredible.
position.
You're a very finite, fickle human being, the same way I am, and yet you have crowned yourself as the center. That's quite a position to assume, sir.
Well, I am the center of my life. Yes, of course. And you're the center of your life.
You're the center of defining what is common sense and what is good and what is terrible.
For myself, yes. You can't, I can't describe what common sense is to you. Either you have it or you don't. And for the most part, it's not out there. It's not very common for the most part. It's an oxymoron.
Tell me, a guy who's going to solve the problem of MS drowns. Tom, that is a totally theoretical flight into fantasy. You don't know that.
If I was a god, I would stop that person from drowning.
Well, maybe God has. You don't know that.
We do know that because 250,000 people died, and you don't know which one in there would have done something good.
You don't know that one of the guys who died would have go out and solved the problem of MS.
I don't, but
That's
you
right.
can't prove the opposite.
So
That's
we're
what I'm trying to say.
Anything proving the opposite. It has nothing to do with anything.
But I think we're getting at kind of the mathematical improbability of discerning who that drowned in the tsunami could solve MS. I think the bigger issue is, okay, like, could you be an atheist and actually lose your faith in atheism?
But there's no faith to lose.
Oh, there's faith. You have expressed so much faith here.
Come on. Faith, Cliff. There's no faith in atheism. The position is we're not convinced there's a God.
Acknowledge that.
Well, when I say faith, I'm saying, okay, we're both looking at the clues and following where the argument leads, and then making a trust decision or a faith decision about that, because we both have agreed that you can't prove the atheist position, you can't prove the theist position. So there is
but there is a probability factor. Like there's a probability of existing unicorns, and there's a probability of, there's a blade of grass growing in my backyard right now.
Well, there's a hierarchy of probability, and right now the hierarchy is that we're at closer to the top in talking about not unicorns or a blade of grass, but of the creator, or there being something outside of the universe that created all of this.
But that's what I'm saying. The probability of that is infinitesimally small because it's never been shown to ever exist. So how can you even portray it as a plausible explanation to anything where it's never been shown to ever exist? That's the problem that atheists have with the theist position, is you're claiming an absolute truth. And Cliff, I'm kind of pointing to you here because this is an extreme point of arrogance. I'm sorry, but you're claiming an absolute point of truth from a perspective that you cannot back up because you don't know. And you're claiming this as an absolute truth, that you have this personal relationship with the one God.
God's existence. Tremendous humility to acknowledge that God exists, that I am not the center of the universe. Tremendous arrogance to deny God's existence and to insist that I am the center of the universe.
No, but do you understand the arrogance? Do you understand the, hold on a second. Do you understand the arrogance it takes to say that I have picked the right God and he has a relationship with me?
Incredible arrogance.
But Cliff, hold on. Do you understand the amount of arrogance it takes to say, I have picked the right God out of the thousands in existence and come and gone, and that God has a relationship with me today? Do you know how much arrogance that takes to say?
It's not me who's created Jesus. Jesus was an historical person.
But do you know how much arrogance it takes to say this? You don't even. The
person who puts their faith in Christ is simply responding to Jesus' claim, to his revelation.
Cliff, you have your God glasses on so tight you can't even see what I'm trying to say.
No, you have your atheist glasses on so tight you can't see reality.
Cliff,
I don't have any glasses on, so maybe I could try to see.
Cliff, just hold on a second, okay? Muhammad in Saudi Arabia is also a believer. He believes in Allah. All right. Now, are you going to tell him that his belief is lesser than yours? No, you can't say that. You don't know. So again, you're going to sit there and say you have picked the right God and that God cares about you today. Well, show me any evidence that God exists, and show me any evidence that God cares about you without some personal experience that cannot be shown. Show it to me some way. Give me something. But if you're just going to sit there and go round and around in circles in argument without ever being able to demonstrate anything, I'm sorry, but you have no leg to stand on.
The reason your question is so disingenuous is because in the past, when we have sought to answer that question, you have cut us off midstream, you have not listened, and then you have heaped lie upon lie. So
okay,
I don't
ahead.
question your legitimacy in asking that question.
Go ahead and elaborate. I'm all ears.
All right. The reason that I respect Muhammad is because he acknowledged the existence of God. So Muhammad and I do not disagree about God's existence. The second question is, who is this God? What is this God like? Muhammad claimed to have accurate revelations of God. Jesus Christ claimed to be God in human form. So now I study the life of Muhammad and I conclude the evidence is he is not as reliable as Jesus Christ is. Why? Because the evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead is that he is a very reliable source of information about God. When I say that 2 + 2 does not equal 5, that is not arrogance. That is a truth claim. In the same way that when I say Jesus Christ is the truth, that is not arrogance. That is a response of a human being to a truth claim made by Jesus Christ. When a Muslim says Muhammad spoke the truth about God, that is not necessarily arrogance. That is possibly a real claim. Muhammad has made a truth claim, and I accept that truth claim. But to say there is no God, and to say that I am going to define the purpose of life, I'm going to say tsunami is an absolute tragedy. I'm going to play the game of saying, well, why would God allow a tsunami to happen if there was someone in that tsunami who drowned, who could have been the one who provided the solution for MS? That's incredible arrogance. You don't know that. You don't know the mind of God. You don't know all these possibilities that you're concocting.
But you claim to?
No.
You claim to know the mind of God?
I don't know. But I can promise you it has nothing to do with whether God exists or not.
So then if you don't know, how can you say it's true? You lost me on this one here.
Oh, no,
if you just said, I don't know, how can you claim that that's true?
I don't know everything there is to know about biology, but I do know some biological truth. I don't know everything there is to know about Canadian history, but I do know some truth about Canadian history. I don't have exhaustive knowledge in any area of life, including God and Jesus Christ. But just because I don't have
But
exhaustive
it's something
knowledge,
that you have
I can't have spiritual knowledge.
studied a long time, no? So I'm presuming you are as close to, a theological expert as I've ever met myself,
Well,
right?
then you hear very clearly from me. I do not know a tremendous amount. Anybody who claims to know God perfectly is lying. Nobody knows God perfectly.
So then
Nobody.
how can you know that this is an absolute truth?
I can't prove God, so I don't know that God is an absolute truth. I've got plenty of doubts and plenty of unanswered questions. But I do know that there's more than enough evidence to believe in God, to trust in Jesus Christ based on the evidence. That doesn't mean I've got a watertight proof case. I don't. I don't have a watertight proof case on anything in life. There is always room for doubt in biology, in every relationship I have, in my faith in Christ, in my belief in the United States government or the Canadian government. There's always room for doubt. And every thinking person has doubt if they're honest about every area of life. The person who doesn't have doubt has stopped thinking.
Tom,
Of course.
I want to just interject just briefly because I think that this could be maybe a good way to continue with it as far as, Tom, you raised at the beginning, well, there's, thousands of different gods out there and all these different religions. We just talked about a little bit, or Cliff just talked a little bit about Christianity and Islam. But wouldn't you say that there are a lot of different strands and differences within the atheist position, as far as some atheists hold to there being an afterlife, or some atheists saying that there's no afterlife, or so on and so forth? Wouldn't you say that there are disagreements within the atheist worldview?
And anybody who believes anything supernatural is not an atheist, in my opinion. You simply can't be. Either you believe in the supernatural or you don't, and or you the way that we like to say it, or that I've heard it said is, I haven't been presented with enough evidence to be able to believe in anything supernatural because it has never been presented to me or anybody else that I know. It's as simple as that. So again, for someone to think that, oh, there might not be a God, but I'm going to be reincarnated because it helps them sleep better at night, and those are stories for children as far as I'm concerned. It's just stroking their little happy thought in their brain, to help them sleep at night, not with the idea that they're not just going to die and as Cliff says, be fertilizer when they're dead. Again, physically speaking, yeah, that's exactly what's going to become of me unless I be cremated. I will become fertilizer, or I'll become ash in an urn, or whatever it may be. But my goal, again, is to make my kids' lives and try to better their lives and the people around them and the people around us. Try to better everyone's life around us. And I had a hard time with answering Cliff's question because I do see that as something that should be a societal goal, bettering.
Target. That's a good target that you have, Tom. That you have an aim to say.
But again,
Yeah,
I see that as a societal goal, not as any kind of religious dogma that needs to be fulfilled. Making a better society for oneself and the next generation to come, and furthermore and furthermore, again, is to me common sense. It's not something that requires some insane amount of philosophical thought. And Cliff says, well, why am I the judge of that? Well, again, I don't see that as something crazy. I see that as quite logical, wanting to make things better or leave it in a better state than I got it. It's very simple. When you borrow something from somebody, you borrow their, someone lets you borrow their cottage, for instance. I always try to leave it in a better state than I found it. Why? Because I want to be invited back.
Mm-hmm.
Simple.
Right. So you're highlighting the utility of certain ethics, that our society would absolutely crumble if everybody just went into chaos and said, no, I'm not going to observe the golden rule, or I'm not going to try to make this place better for my kids, or this or that. But all of those.
Again, some people do live their lives against society. Keep that in mind. You do have sociopaths, you do have psychopaths out there that don't care about hurting people. Truly don't. So again, if if we're all made in the in the image of God, it boggles my mind how I can be seen in the same light and as some psycho or sociopath out there that truly doesn't care about people, doesn't care about anything but his own backside. So that's a tough one. Like how do you get around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tom, you have a couple of kids, and you have taught them that there are consequences to their actions. That if you touch a hot stove, you're going to burn your hand. You want to teach them not to be naive about.
I'm saying, yeah, that applies for the majority of the population. I'm saying, what about the ones that doesn't?
Right. Well,
What
so
about
that,
the people that just don't care, or as the quote goes, just want to watch the world burn? That just don't care.
right, and that's a real issue, and so we're left with the question: well, did they get what they deserve, or is it really just everyone for themselves and might makes right? I think again, Tom,
Well, it is a consensus basis, obviously. I mean, look at any voting system, look at any judicial system where there's a jury. It's the majority rules pretty much. It's always been that way. Look at your own military. Like that's not to get into a political conversation, but America is seen as the global police force. Why? Because might makes right, right? It
well,
is true. It does happen. It's quite practical too.
Mhm.
Somebody has to be in charge, and there's no way that's going to be the weakest link in the chain.
Right. But what happens when the person in charge or the country in charge goes off the wire and decides to just destroy themselves and destroy others? Because when someone says life has no meaning for me, we're concerned for them. But when they say life has no meaning for me and I'm going to make this world burn, then we try to lock them up because we know just to the extent with which they can inflict damage upon this reality that we're living in. So ultimately, though, we have to say, okay, that's not just the subjective flavor of an individual. There's something seriously wrong there. And whether it's nature or nurture, whatever choices we hold them accountable to.
But hold on a second. How can you use the word wrong when that person, that human being, is still a human being? How can you say that how they've come out is wrong? It's not. That's just how they've come out.
Right,
You see
but
where I'm coming from? Like you're going to call a person wrong just because they happen to be the way they are
well, I'm
through
going to
through no real choice of their own, whether it's nature, nurture, biology, the way they were brought up, whatever it may be. But again, if someone turns into a psychopath or a sociopath, that's normal as
it's fair
well.
to say that we still hold them accountable for some of the choices that they've made. That they made some choices along the way that has led them down a darker and darker path. And
Sure, but I'm saying it's still considered normal and natural to have that percentage of the population be socio or psychopaths,
well, from our
and will always be there.
well, but from our faith perspective, Tom, is ultimately like everybody has got what's called a sin within them, a sin nature, a propensity to do wrong, to rip others off, so on and so forth. And so we need outside help in the same way that we're saying, well, okay, there is a transcendent code of morality that we are all held to ultimately. Does that make sense?
No, because
What
we're
does
not.
about it?
We're
How are we?
not.
All right, then how are we, or how are we not?
We're not held up to any moral standard at the end of the day. I mean, aside from the people around us, but when we're gone, that's it. And any moral, um, you know, lack that you had in your life is gone with you at that point. It's not like you're taking that with you. You're done. You're now fertilizer,
Hmm. Well,
right?
I would say
So
that's part of what gives life meaning, isn't it? That it has an end date to it, that it has an expiration to it. And
And again, that's where atheist and theist, it's kind of funny because we have everything to live for and nothing to die for, whereas you guys are the opposite. You guys want the end times to come so you can go be with Jesus.
Tom, are you telling me that if a murderer walked into your house and started killing your family, you wouldn't try to die for them?
Of course I would.
Right. So you have people who you would die for.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat here. We would die for our family too.
No, but what I'm saying is, we, again, because we think that this life is all we have, we
Okay.
truly do have everything to live for now. Whereas you guys, you know what, this is just, it's kind of a stepping stone kind of a situation where the real life is, when we go be with Jesus. That's nuts.
Yeah, I would say that is nuts, and I don't agree with that. That when you trust Jesus, you start living in the here and now in this world.
But a lot of people don't take, come on, and I know that a lot of believers don't take that step. They're like,
Sure.
oh, you know what, screw this place. Whatever happens here happens. We're going to be with Jesus and that's that.
Right, Tom. And a lot of people abuse science or medicine, but that doesn't turn me off to either pursuits of knowledge in that. So
I'm just saying, like, how do you account for those people is what I'm saying.
How do I account for them? I mean, I don't know those people entirely, but I do know.
I don't know atheists that believe in an afterlife. So you ask me a hypothetical, I'm asking you a hypothetical.
What did he ask me? Do you want to respond? I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand the question. I think
your thinking broke down, Tom.
Well, I think part of it was that we're okay. First of all, we're holding to all have sinned. Nobody seeks after God. Nobody cares to know about God. That's part of our faith position. So to say like about those people who call themselves Christians but don't follow anything of what Christ commands or says, well, then, that gets back at earlier in our conversation that they don't have any integrity. There's no oneness. There's no matching up with what they say with what they do. And I don't think it discredits anything about Christ. I think, yeah, there plenty of dark tales of Christianity and dark sides of the history of Christianity, sure, but they are always in direct contradiction with the teachings of the founder of Christianity or of Christ. And so I think there's hypocrisy in any, sadly, in any branch of knowledge or any pursuit.
I mean, the one thing that Christianity has is it was the first for a lot of things. It was our first attempt at philosophy. It was our first attempt at astronomy. It was our first attempt at quite a few things, at sciences.
I don't think it was the first attempt, though, in a lot of those. I would think it was the first that's been really historical.
Yes, agreed. That documented, shall we say. So the fact that it had, it has that foundation as being the basis of modern day science. We got chemistry from alchemy. We got astronomy from astrology. So the fact that, it was there first, even I myself must give credit to that. You may or may not like Islam, but they did create algebra, right? So, there certain things need to be given credit. And again, the church, the Christian church, did have that starting point of being able to say, okay, you know what? Now we're going to start teaching people. Now we're going to start doing this. Now we have money. Now we're going to start opening up schools across the ocean. Because why? Back then, it was the church who had the money. People didn't have money back then. It was churches who had money. There weren't multinational corporations back then. No, it was the church. You want something done, you went to the church. Why did Michelangelo do all those things for the church? Well, he was an artist. And what do artists need? Money. Simple as that. What would have Michelangelo painted on, the American Institute of Sciences roof if he were around today and got paid for it? I don't know. I think it'd be pretty cool. It's a pretty cool question to kind of think about, as opposed to the Sistine Chapel roof, right? But again, he did it because of the money. The money was in the church. Of course, they're going to center around where the money is at the time. And again, the church is going to expand, and it's going to make schools and everything else to go along with it. Sure, like your schools opened up in the States there in the 1600s, like we were talking about a few weeks ago. And again, they were Christian-based schools. Why? Because again, the church was the one with money and could afford to do it. No one else could.
But you don't open schools unless you have a belief system that says that truth is knowable, that observation is something that is unique to human consciousness, and you really want to place yourself within the context of history. I mean, I don't think history is just a tale told by the winners, or you just follow the money trail and that tells the whole story all the time. I think that there's
It's a pretty good one.
well, yeah, but at the same time, I think part of why we're having this conversation is we're getting at, okay, what's the plausibility structure for the atheistic worldview? I mean, I want to hear more.
But again, you're asking for something that doesn't exist, because what we're saying is you guys have not provided us with any evidence to prove your case. Therefore, we don't want to believe in something without evidence. That's all. That's it. I don't have to go out and prove an atheistic point of view, because all I'm saying is the idea of a God has never been proven, has never been shown to be true. There's nothing supernatural that I've ever witnessed in my life that people have offered money to document, to witness in front of them, and no one has ever collected. So that leads me to believe that none of this ever exists. It cannot exist.
So what I hear from you is that you're putting the burden of evidence all on the theist position and none on the atheist position.
Because you're taking the positive stance. You're saying this exists. Therefore, it's on you to prove the existence of whatever you're saying. If I'm saying that there's a celestial teapot in the sky orbiting the moon of Jupiter, well, the onus is on me to prove it now to you. It's not, the onus can't be on you to disprove it. That's retarded. The onus is obviously on me to be able to prove that there is a teapot orbiting the moon of Jupiter. Is it not? You're taking the positive stance, not me. I'm just saying you haven't provided me with any evidence to be able to agree with your stance.
I think you're coming at that objection with the presupposition that whether it's a teapot or whatever thing you're talking about, it is just totally abnormal and something that is
believing in stories from 2,000 years ago is abnormal to me. It is.
Well,
it can't. I have a hard time putting it into my head how people believe in what they do, because it's so foreign to me to believe in stories from so long ago, from Bronze Age myths.
But I would say that if you're really going to discredit it just because it's 2,000 years ago, that's a form of chronological snobbery. That you're saying that you can't really know what happened 2,000 years ago because they were all just living in a bunch of superstition. They actually did science back then. They actually had observations. They actually lived in a reality much as our own. And so just to say that it's discredited because it happened 2,000 years ago is chronological poof. It doesn't really hold much weight. It's kind of ethnocentric when it comes to our view of time. But our time is kind of running out. Maybe we should go back to thinking about, or maybe we can have another conversation, just talking about following the clues to where atheism or theism leads.
No. I mean, glad we got today. Done, because I was honestly afraid we're going to still keep having technical issues. So. What we'll do is let's agree in the meantime on a couple of topics, and now that we know that we got things down and going the way it should be, that we can have a more back and forth kind of cool conversation going.
That sounds great. Is there maybe we should recommend a book to each other so that maybe we could have a book to look at, and discuss some of the topics.
You're taking a massive assumption, assuming that I have the time to actually read a book.
Okay, all right, good. All right,
if I don't have a kid in one hand, I'm working. So.
All right, there we go.
I'm a delight to talk.
Listen, guys, thank you. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll talk to you hopefully next week.
Look forward to it.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.